We'll stick to thank you.
Kia ora.
Welcome, Dean. And we're discussing the Local Government Systems Improvement Amendment Bill. And we have, I think, only 5 minutes for your submission as individual. So over to you, and you're welcome to leave some time for questions at the end, and we have received and read your questions.
Thank you, and kia ora e te committee. As you know, I'm a professor of law at Te Hangarawaka, Victoria University, Wellington, and local government is one of my areas of interest and expertise. So I will try and be brief because 3 particular points that I pulled out of the bill. First is the amendment of local government's purpose, which I oppose. In my view, this changes rhetoric only. It legally won't actually change the scope of the activities local authorities can engage in. And I wrote about this when the purpose was recast previously away from community wellbeing, and that article was provided as part of my submission. In short, the framing of purpose in the proposed terms, amongst other things for the delivery of local public services, which is going to be the key aspect of that, moves from an outcomes-based mission to an outputs-based activity list or functional list. But when we look at the key phrase, local public services, that's a meaningless phrase. It's so contextual, it's so ambiguous, it's so contested that it can basically mean anything. It's what we call in the trade a floating signifier. It's an idea that can be filled with whatever normative content one wants, and that means it's inapt as a regulator of jurisdiction. So the proposed change, in my view, is more performative only, and to the extent that the change is symbolic, I think it sends a bad signal because it sits at odds with the very raison d'etre or the essence of local government in our traditions internationally, and the constitutional thinking has always been that local government does more than the mere service delivery like a government department. One of its essential features is its democratic character, its ability to be responsive to the needs of and priorities of the community. It's about localism, or as I prefer to put it, democracy in the neighbourhood. So central government prescriptions of activity sits in tension with that. Secondly, the clause codifying the provision of information to elected members is one which I support, but I think needs to be tweaked to make it work. And I've been a vocal commentator in the space on the anti-democratic practices of some chief executives that resist the provision of information to councillors and keep our democratic stewards in the dark about the matters they are ultimately accountable to the community on. So I think the codification is wise, but I worry that it still leaves the chief executive as the ultimate gatekeeper. In other words, on its face, it's up to the chief executive to make the call on whether something is reasonably necessary for an elected member's duties. Just a couple of things on that. I think without more, that risks exacerbating the problem and fortifying the power imbalance as it invites the chief executive just to say to the council, you don't need it. Trust me, we'll deal with that, it's operational. That's wrong. Existing English common law authority, which we've previously relied on, actually said the governing body itself should make these calls in marginal cases, something I suggest to be drafted in the Act. Because when you think about it, in principle in the New Zealand context, it's hard to think about information held by a local authority that isn't reasonably necessary for those councillors to discharge their stewardship and accountability of the community. I've mentioned a couple of areas which I think beyond scope. Personal employment matters matter for the chief executive because of employment duties there, and elected member having a conflict of interest. I also think there needs to be a swift, effective and independent external review mechanism for elected members to test that denial of information. I've suggested the ombuds, but I'm actually a bit uncomfortable about that because as responsible elected members, I don't think they should have to rely on the maladministration complaints process for the general public when it's actually a matter of internal democratic governance. It's constitutional. The last point I want to say is I support the concept of prescribed or model code of conduct. Again, I've been publicly vocal on some of the weaponisation of codes and the chilling of democratic democratic discourse. But I think the efficacy of this depends on the work of, for example, the Local Government Commission on its model code. But I'm being disappointed to only learn about the consultation on that draft after it closed, and having looked at it, I think there's some really worrying aspects which entrench some of the problems there. So I just said in my submission, I think the legislation should set out some guiding principles for the development of those codes, even if the actual detail of it is dealt elsewhere. So I've been pretty brief. I'm happy to take questions.
No, we do have some time. Lee Foster. Thank
Yeah,
you.
look, thank you very much. And I agree with you about the full well-beings because when it was in or out, it didn't actually make a lot of difference to what we did. But what I am interested in is how we actually make sure that the councils do what they need to do and also don't spend too much of ratepayers' money. In other words, there's a bit of discipline. So how we get that balance right. And if I can just ask the second question is because you've said quite a bit about the CEs. At the moment, the proposition in the bill is to say CE 5 years and then up to another 5 years. But it strikes me that CEs, the power that CEs have in part is because of the duration that they get compared to the council. And whether you have any comment on that, it was, council gets 3, CE gets 5, who's the stronger one.
That's right. On the first one, I'm a believer in democracy, but I think we've got to, in the ballot box, and I think we've got some challenges after the last weekend about improving that. But, the idea of local government is this stuff is deliberated in conversation with communities. So I think the work about how do we re-engage and revitalise the local democracy is the ultimate thing, because that stewardship relationship between the elected members and their community is key for sending signals and priorities. And we just got to crack that. It's not that don't have the time in the minutes to go to say how that's done, but it's actually it's about local authorities standing up for the value of what being an elected local body does and the value that brings. And I think it's being lost in the noise at the moment. In terms of the CEs and the power of it, I agree with you, Reid. I think that's one of the real problems. And one of the problems I think which probably feeds into the first thing is people are voting for elected members thinking they're driving the ship. And if the real power lies in the chief executive and the management, then you've got this disconnect between the power and the representation. So for me, I'm a big one in saying that we've got to strengthen the role of elected members, whether it be, this is a good one on the information budget, using the Auckland Mayor's model is another one, support for elected members to do their job better. And then you've got a better conversation on the fiscal things and the priorities and where the spend is, rather than being done off in the bowels of the council office itself. Let's bring it out. Let's not get. There is politics in local government. That's a good thing, because that fuels the democracy and the democratic discourse. So let's not be afraid of having some politics and real contestation around the political branch and conversation with the community.
Thank you. We are out of time now, but we really appreciate your submission and brief oral submission today and your writing on this. So I'm sure we'll see you again. Thank you so much.
I might get in touch with you, Dean.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you. Now I'd like to welcome our next